The Ain't No Fang podcast. From Arizona Sports, Ain't No Fang.
The Arizona Diamondbacks could punch their ticket to the playoffs today. They could do it today. But then a team that is already lacking in starting pitching loses another starting pitcher. All right, let's talk about it. Steve Zinsmeister, Alex Weiner covers the team for Arizona Sports. Alex, the team could clinch today. They've got an 11-10, I think, start against the Chicago White Sox. That is the last game in Chicago before they come home for a 3-game stint against the Houston Astros, who have their own things to play for right now. We'll get into that a little bit. But let's run through the absolute basics of how the Diamondbacks go about making the playoffs for the first time since 2017. They could do it today if they win, and if they get a little bit of help from the Braves, who are playing the Cubs. That's the easiest and preferred way to get into the playoffs.
Yeah, to kind of break it down, because I feel like the magic number is great, but when there's so many different teams, it can kind of convolute it a little bit. Technically, the magic number is 2, because with a win against the White Sox, and granted, any MLB podcast you listen to for the next 3 days is going to be like outdated within like 2 hours.
Oh, we probably will be too.
You know, or at least elements of it will be outdated in 2 hours. So we are recording this on Thursday before their series finale against the White Sox. If they win that game, so I guess to kind of do process of elimination, the Reds cannot catch up to them. So throw the Reds to the side, because if the Diamondbacks win against the White Sox, they would be at 85 wins. The Reds are at 81. They do not play Thursday. They only have 3 games left. They can't get to 85. It goes to the Cubs. If the D-backs win and the Cubs lose, the D-backs will be 3 games ahead of the Cubs with 3 games left with the tiebreaker. So the Cubs cannot catch up to the Diamondbacks. So that is how they clinch. And this is not clinching the 5 seed or the 6 seed specifically. This is just clinching one of the 2 spots. Because even if the Diamondbacks beat the White Sox to sweep them and the Marlins lose against the New York Mets, the Marlins can still catch up and pass the Diamondbacks because they have the tiebreaker. So that's sort of what we're looking at right now. So yeah, if the Braves beat the Cubs, but first things first, if the Diamondbacks beat the White Sox, if those 2 things happen, they're going to the postseason. We just don't know what seed it would be yet.
And it's not like all hope is lost if they lose today against the Chicago White Sox. You've still got the 3 games against the Astros, which it appears the Astros will have something to play for. But even if you win 2 of your final 4 games, you can still clinch a playoff spot. There's a scenario where the Diamondbacks could lose every game for the rest of the season. Not that I'm hoping that happens. And they could still get in with some help from some other teams. So certainly a lot of different ways the Diamondbacks can get in going forward. The easiest just happens to be today. And it's important because you're facing the end of the season pitching rotation and where guys line up on days. Right now, Merrill Kelly is slated to pitch the second to last game of the year. Zach Gallen would be the day before. That's Friday and Saturday. Then you've got that Sunday game. We still don't really know what they're going to do there, or even if that game will be important to the Diamondbacks. So if you're going to plan for game 1 of a potential wild card series against whoever it may be, you're hoping to bump Merrill Kelly from that Saturday game and do a bullpen game of sorts so that he can be available for game 1.
Absolutely, 100% right, because the playoffs start on Tuesday. So yeah, if it's Gallen Friday, Merrill Saturday, then neither of them would be fully gassed up for game 1. You would have to go Gallen game 2, Kelly game 3, and game 3 is not a guaranteed game because it's only a best of 3 series. So by clinching early, you know, I don't know if they want to just put them to the side and say you're going in games 1 and 2, you're not going to throw this Astro series at all, or if maybe it'll be Gallen throws 2 innings, sort of like a pseudo bullpen to stay sharp, and then he goes in game 2 and Kelly goes in game 1. They push Kelly back to game 1 or something like that. But it gives them the flexibility to ensure that both of their top starters are pitching in a playoff series when they need to, as opposed to Brandon Pfaadt, who was terrific on Wednesday against the White Sox, but you feel a little bit more comfortable if it's Gallen or Kelly going game 1 versus a rookie who, and granted, none of them have pitched in the postseason before, but, it's Pfaadt's first season as a major leaguer, and to throw him into the fire like that, I think that's a little bit more dicey than just getting one of your solid guys.
So let's say the Diamondbacks clinch today, as early as possible on Thursday.
Sure.
Then you head into the Houston series. You're supposed to have Gallen tomorrow. Do you pitch Zach Gallen tomorrow? And like you said, throw him for 2-3 innings just to get him comfortable and just so he gets his work in and he doesn't have to skip days? Or do you hold him out and give him the extra couple days of rest so that Gallen could potentially be ready for game 1? Then Merrill Kelly slides into game 2. But then the problem is, if you do that, it's almost like the downside of clinching too early is Brandon Pfaadt is your assumed starter for game 3 because he's really the only other preferred starter in the rotation.
The only other starter in the rotation if Ryan Nelson's going to be a long reliever.
And so then the question is, if you do that plan, Brandon Pfaadt pitched on Wednesday, yesterday. But game 3 is probably not going to be until Thursday. At least a week after that. So then do you give him a full week off? It's kind of an interesting game of chess that they're trying to play right now, figuring out where the pieces best fit. Yeah, I'm sure they have a giant whiteboard with like 80 different scenarios. And like, here, if we win this game and they lose this game, we'll pitch this guy this many innings. It's impossible to say exactly what they'd want to do with that. But I think if they can line it up, Gallen, Kelly, Pfaadt, you do it. If that means, I don't know, Pfaadt pitches 2 innings. Actually, no, that wouldn't work because Pfaadt can't pitch on Sunday because that would be on short rest. Yeah. Unless they feel like it'd be his bullpen day and they throw him out there for 25 pitches and then that's it. They can kind of do that with all 3 of their starters over the weekend. They could do that with bullpen games. Maybe.
Well, not really. You wouldn't really love that. Maybe they call somebody
Ryan
up.
Nelson game, maybe, or
yeah. I feel like Ryan Nelson is going to start or at least get the bulk of the innings for one of those 3 games. He came in relief on Tuesday against the White Sox and pitched really, really well. So that's sort of your key there. You can kind of lean on Nelson a little bit, but yeah, it's going to be interesting if they clinch early, like how they manage that, because you don't want to put too many innings on the bullpen right before the playoffs start. But on the other hand, they have Monday off anyway to reset it, so maybe they would be more able to. I don't really know. I'm trying to like kind of talk it out with you as we kind of go here, because it's such an interesting spot that they're in and how they can handle this. But the sooner they can get this clinched, the more flexibility they'd have and the more they kind of have to piece it together. But both are a challenge to try to get yourself as ready as you could possibly be for game 1.
And maybe there's somebody sitting in the minor leagues that's on the 40-man that you could call up and just give a spot start, because we
Tyler Gilbert, get him a couple innings, something like that.
Let's talk about another starting pitcher. Zach Davies went the other day, and he's had some really rough outings this season, which is indicated in his 7 ERA for the regular season. They DFA'd him immediately after the start. I sensed some frustration there. John Gambadoro had reported, the way he worded it was the Diamondbacks were just ticked that every time he pitched, they had to dig deep into the bullpen, 5, sometimes 6 innings at a time. And Zach Davies, the way Gambo put it, was he wasn't going to pitch in any meaningful games going forward. And I believe that to be true, barring any sort of like he needs to come in the 2nd or 3rd inning in an emergency or cleanup role. So Zach Davies goes away. It's weird because on the one hand, I get it. The numbers aren't good. A 1.66 whip is not good. A 7 ERA is kind of harkens back to Madison Bumgarner's numbers when they DFA'd him earlier in the season.
They're worse.
So on the one hand, I get it, right? Quick hook. And the Diamondbacks have had it all year long. And I like that aspect of it. But when you're a team going into the postseason potentially in the next couple of days and you only have 3 starting pitchers, that's risky.
It's curious, especially because what we just talked about. Because they DFA'd Davies to recall Justin Martinez. They have a very deep bullpen right now, and the bullpen has pitched great, and they're getting multiple innings from certain guys. Andrew Sofrank hasn't even given up a run yet. Ryan Thompson's given up 1 run. Frias has not given up a run this month. I mean, they've had all these guys pitching super, super well. And now they add Justin Martinez into the mix as sort of a high upside guy who hasn't always, had the best results in the major league so far this year. But what we just talked about, like Davies could have given you, in theory, 20 batters on Sunday if they had already clinched and the game didn't mean anything to them. And now you don't have that. So it's interesting, but you're right. I mean, it just got to a point where if you're going to try to win every single game to keep yourself alive and to keep yourself playing, you need guys who can get you outs. And Zach Davies was not getting you outs. It sort of kind of like what they were doing with Nelson and what they were doing with Pfaadt. They were keeping them around 2 go-arounds through the batting order. Around 18 batters, give or take a few. Yesterday they went a little longer with Pfaadt because he was throwing so well and they were winning. 2 rounds through the batting order for Davies was like 3 innings. Just because he wasn't getting the outs, he wasn't missing the bats. They were piecing him up. I mean, he got crushed against the White Sox on Tuesday. They won 15-4. And shouts to Teo Mackey from AC Central because he tweeted that they won the last 5 starts that Davies made, even after he was consistently getting hit very, very hard and giving up a lot of runs. So, it's just at this point in the season, they need guys who can get them the outs. They need to get to 27 outs somehow, because if it's not Gallen or Kelly, they just have to piece it together and get the 27. He's not getting you as deep into games as they need from somebody who has that specific role. And so they're just going to try to piece it together with the guys who have been getting it done.
Zach Davies is an interesting case because I thought he was a pretty solid pitcher for the first 5 seasons in Milwaukee. Kind of an under the radar.
He's had a good career.
Yeah, he had an ERA
200 starts.
4 in 4 of those 5 seasons. Then he goes to San Diego during the odd COVID season, and he's one of the best pitchers in baseball. I mean, he had a 2.73 ERA and 69 innings is, a decent sample size for that particular season, and a whip of 1.07. I mean, he was really, really good that year. One of the best in the game. Goes to Chicago. I believe that was that the Darvish trade maybe he got moved in, I want to say, or
was he a free agent? Was that a trade?
It was one of those, but he ends up in Chicago. He ends up coming to Arizona, and he just hasn't been the same pitcher since the COVID year. I know the COVID year did that to a lot of guys.
Have you seen Dylan Bundy's COVID year?
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of guys that they haven't been special any other year but that year. And there's some guys who are special every year, and they were terrible that season. So he's really just he's one of those guys that I think of in baseball that the COVID year was just a different universe almost from the rest of his career.
You're correct, by the way. That was the Yu Darvish trade.
I thought so, yeah.
Yeah, it was Victor Caratini and Yu Darvish to San Diego. And then he went on with this package of prospects.
He was a big piece of that trade. I mean, Davies was thought of as kind of one of the premier pieces coming back to Chicago in that deal, and he stayed there, just one
year.
Season.
Yeah,
he was 6-12 that year. It was one of his worst seasons on record. If probably this one might be a little bit worse. Listen, he's 30 years old. He could catch on somewhere. He could continue his career. I have no doubt about that.
He was a valuable innings eater last year. Maybe he'll be again.
Yeah, and unfortunately for the Diamondbacks over the last few years, I feel like they've had to rely on a lot of those types of guys. Mike Leake comes to mind, where he just wasn't really the guy. He was just kind of around to eat innings.
Sun Devil, though.
Former Sun Devil. That's true. We were talking about the last time the Diamondbacks made the playoffs was 2017, and how the play-in game kind of messed with their rotation because they threw, if I remember right, they threw Greinke, and then they threw Ray in that game in relief. So then even though you win the game in dramatic fashion, you end up going into the next series and it screws up your whole rotation because you've used your top 2 starters in that game. I think they ended up going with Taijuan Walker.
And Zach Godley. They both pitched.
And Zach Godley.
In game 1, they both pitched.
And so you just end up in that terrible situation where your pitching has been essentially ruined by the wild card game. That system is gone. Now you're likely to get a 3-game series in a wild card. So I don't know. Hopefully they don't have to go through something like that again, where they're pitching all of their best guys in one game that's going to ruin the next series. Yeah,
that's the system's going to. Also, just kind of looking at Zach Davies, totally off topic here, but he was traded for Gerardo Parra straight up in 2015. It's a little former Diamondback.
So he went from Milwaukee?
No, from Baltimore to Milwaukee for Gerardo Parra. Straight up.
Oh, he was in Baltimore. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Actually. He didn't play for Baltimore, though, did he?
He was drafted by Baltimore. He didn't actually play a game for them in the major leagues, no.
Straight up for Gerardo Parra. Yeah, long time Diamondback.
I love going through trade trees like that, too. I mean,
funny. And Milwaukee's is very interesting. Just like, I was looking through it recently with the David Stern acquisition.
Yeah.
David Stern's going to the Mets, and he's got a crazy trade history in Milwaukee where they won a lot of big trades. Zach Davies certainly a piece of it. Okay, so we head into the playoffs potentially as early as today. It's very likely the Diamondbacks make the postseason. It would take 4 straight losses and a lot of things to go wrong for them not to. Yeah. And I don't want to speak that into the universe necessarily, but it is a possibility at this point. Word on the street is you could be traveling with the team as well.
I believe so. I believe I'll be wherever they go.
Where would you hope the Diamondbacks go when it comes to who they could face in the first round, the wild card round of the playoffs?
So we know which 2 teams are hosting the wild card round. The Phillies on Tuesday clinched their spot in the playoffs. They clinched the top wild card spot. So they're I guess if you want to think of it as seeds 1 through 6, they are the 4 seed. The Brewers clinched the NL Central with the Cubs losing that crazy game the other day where Seiya Suzuki dropped the fly ball, which we can kind of get into what the heck the Cubs are doing these last few games, because in order for them not to be neck and neck with the Diamondbacks right now, it has taken a couple of miracles. I mean, the Seiya Suzuki drops a ball in the bottom of the 8th inning with 2 outs and allows 2 runs to score, and they lose by 1. The next day, they blow another lead and lose an extra innings after Ronald Acuna Jr. steals his 70th bag of the year, giving him 40-70, and then they give up a walk-off to Ozzie Albies. Unbelievable 2 days of baseball where they lose a couple of games on the D-backs.
Miracles. They would call
them just curses. Yeah, just like what the heck is going on here. But because of their loss the other day with the dropped fly ball, the Brewers clinched the NL Central, which we knew they would anyway because they're so far ahead. So if the Diamondbacks finish in the second wild card spot, which is where they are right now, they would go to Philadelphia and then potentially, if they beat the Phillies, to Atlanta to face the Braves, who are the number 1 seed. If the D-backs drop, like let's say the Marlins catch up to them and they tie, and the Marlins have the tiebreaker, so they end in the second wildcard spot, the D-backs get the third wildcard spot, they would go to Milwaukee with a track that would lead them to Los Angeles against the Dodgers if they beat the Brewers.
So the question is, which path do you like better? Philadelphia, Atlanta, or Milwaukee, LA? I know which one I would pick.
Which one would you pick?
I'd pick Milwaukee, LA.
Yeah.
I think Milwaukee's the team that I'd rather face in the first round because I think that's more winnable. That's a team who has a pretty good top end of their starting rotation.
Yeah.
And that's probably the most intimidating part, but their lineup is not anything that I'm overly worried about. They've got a couple of really nice players. William Contreras has been one of the surprise catchers in baseball over the last few seasons. I really like Willy Adames, although his batting average has been much lower this season. Christian Yelich has had a resurgence this season. But aside from that, I'm not overly intimidated by anything in their lineup. And they may say the same about the Diamondbacks. But if I'm choosing between the Phillies and the Brewers, first round, I'm going Brewers all day long. Phillies were in the World Series recently. They've gotten a lot of their players back. So I think I would pick Milwaukee there. And then, honestly, I'd rather play the Dodgers than the Braves.
Even with the weird juju around Dodger Stadium and the Diamondbacks going to Dodger Stadium.
I think for me, but it just comes down to which team would I rather play. And I think the Braves are the best team in baseball, in my opinion. And I think they have the best player in baseball, who you just mentioned is the first ever to hit 40-70. I mean, that's just insane. They've got arguably the best pitcher in baseball, or at least in terms of strikeouts, and that's Spencer Strider. I'd rather face the Brewers and the Dodgers. I'd rather face both of them.
Yeah, I totally understand that. It's so different between the Brewers and the Phillies what they do well. Because with the Brewers, you know who the top 3 pitchers you're going to be facing in that series are. It's going to be Brandon Woodruff, it's going to be Corbin Burns, and it's going to be Freddie Peralta. They've all made all-star teams. They've all pitched in the postseason before, and they're all on a heater right now. They've been terrific. Brandon Woodruff has missed most of the season. Since he's come back, he's been one of the best starting pitchers, if not the best starting pitcher in the major leagues. So that is the problem there. And their bullpen is really, really good.
Even Wade Miley has been really good.
They probably wouldn't have to deal with him.
Former Diamondback, by the way.
He has been very good. If they make it deeper into the postseason, they're going to need him, and he's been very serviceable.
Yeah.
And their bullpen's great. Devin Williams is a great closer. Joel Payamps has not had a great month, but he's had a very, very good season. Former Diamondback.
Another former Diamondback.
I think, was it 2019, 2020, something like that?
Yeah, I don't remember.
He's been cut by like 8 teams or something like that and found his way to Milwaukee and has been great.
Good for him.
So,
it's been fantastic.
Very good bullpen, very good rotation. You're right about the lineup. It's not that good. Although, an interesting thing with the Brewers and the Diamondbacks is that they both made offseason trades that really, really led them to where they are now.
Contreras
and Payamps were both in that Sean Murphy deal where the Brewers just kind of came in and took Contreras,
right,
only giving away Estuary Ruiz. And that, I mean, Contreras is the best hitter. This year he's been their best hitter, him and Yelich. And Payamps has been a great setup man, sort of like when the Diamondbacks, dealt Dartland Varsho to the Blue Jays, and they got their franchise catcher of the future in Gabriel Moreno and Lourdes Gurriel, who's a staple in the middle of the lineup. So it was kind of interesting how the two teams made like this one trade in the offseason that really helped spur everything else.
Both centered around catchers, too.
Both centered around catchers.
Which we've talked a lot this season about the impact of the catcher position, and Certainly the Diamondbacks have tried to find their answer to, I mean, when was the last time they had a real stalwart at catcher? Miguel Montero for many years.
There he is.
Oh, there he is right behind me, making an appearance in the podcast. Yeah, I mean, they've certainly tried. I mean, for a while they were trying like the 3-catcher system, and I never really believed fully in that. It was 3 guys who were good at specific things, but not altogether good catchers. I think that their attempt with Carson Kelly, trading Paul Goldschmidt, that was part of it, was they felt he was the answer at catcher. He wasn't. And that's okay. It just stinks because you traded away your greatest player of your franchise's history, in terms of offensively at least. But yeah, no, that is an interesting comparison between the Brewers and the Diamondbacks, because they really have revamped their lineups this year with catcher additions. Certainly Corbin Carroll has a lot to do with the revamp.
Well, it's not everything. It's not everything. It's just they each made a trade that definitely helped them get to where they are now, and that's the one parallel I can find there. The Phillies, so different. Their lineup is insane, and it's been firing recently. I mean, Trey Turner has been unbelievable over the past month and a half.
2 months.
Plus,
yeah.
2 months after a slow start. And, after he was like Captain America, essentially, in the World Baseball Classic for them. And
he had a really rough first half.
It's really tough. Yeah, really he was really struggling. And, I mean, you saw his numbers when they last played the Diamondbacks in June, and they weren't pretty. Lately, he's been terrific. Harper and Schwarber and Castellanos have all been very, very good lately. You fill that out with Alec Boehm and JT Realmuto and Brandon Marsh, who have all had great seasons too. So it's just totally different. You're getting a gauntlet of a starting 9. The pitching is much more questionable because Zach Wheeler's had a very good season. Nola's been up and down. He's been mostly okay, like kind of mid-4s ERA.
4.46.
Taijuan Walker has fallen off in the second half, which has been a trend with him.
4.43.
Ranger Suarez has been pretty good, but again, it's a lot more questionable than what you're getting with Milwaukee. So it's like, okay, in the playoffs, it's like, what wins you games? Both do, but the Phillies hitters can change a series with one swing of the bat, while the Brewers, you're going to have to grind it out against them and play really clean and try to win some gutty games.
Yeah, so I guess when you put it in that context, I trust the Diamondbacks offense more than I trust their pitching staff. And I think most people have felt that way all season long. Even before the season started, we kind of knew the pitching staff would be at least somewhat
even with the way
suspect.
The bullpen is pitching right now.
Even with the bullpen pitching the way it is, I going into the playoffs, I anticipate you're going to have 2 really, really awesome starters, and everything else is just kind of up in the air. No offense to Brandon Pfaadt. He's been really good lately. It's just he's still a rookie, and to ask him to be your 3rd starter in a playoff series, that's a big ask.
It's amazing they got here with the rotation they have, isn't it?
That's my point, all season long I've trusted the offense more than the pitching staff, and I feel that way going into the postseason. So I guess in that sense, I trust the Diamondbacks hitters to adjust to good pitching against them, rather than trusting the pitching staff to adjust to a really good lineup that they have to face multiple times in a series. I'd rather face the Brewers any day of the week than the Phillies. That's just the way that I feel, because I think the Phillies are getting hot at the right time. I'm with you. I love that lineup that they have. Even though if you look at the statistics, like over the course of a full season, nobody on that team has an OPS plus over 120 other than Bryce Harper. And so they have like 1 star player and then a bunch of really good players that are having nice seasons.
But if you twist that to the last 2 months,
it's devastating.
It shoots up, yeah.
Yeah, they've been really, really good lately. So I'll take the Brewers any day of the week over the Phillies. I just trust a team to beat the Brewers. And actually, that kind of harkens back to the Diamondbacks and Brewers had a contentious playoff series when it wasn't 17.
11.
Obviously. It would have been 11.
Yeah.
Which was the time before.
Ryan Braun and Tatman was on the team. And
Nyjer Morgan, I feel like, was a big part of that series, if I remember right. So, yeah, I mean, we're going way back now, but that's kind of where I want to go. I want to go to Milwaukee.
Totally understandable. But, it's... The Brewers have been really, really good too.
I know.
So
I know you're. I mean, listen, it's
the playoffs. You have to beat some good teams. At least the Diamondbacks have already hit around Corbin Burns once this year. Remember Alec Thomas home run when he came back off the when they brought him back up after he went down to the minor leagues, came back up, hit that huge home run against Corbin Burns. Granted, that was a long time ago at this point. They haven't played either of these two teams in a while, like well before the trade deadline. They are different, a little bit different now than they were when they played them both the first couple times. So that's a little, that's a wrinkle too. We can look at some of those games that they played against both of them, but it was so long ago that it's hard to find a lot of real, I guess, points of like, oh, that's what we can kind of harp on. When they matched up, this happened. It's not really. It's
a whole new beginning for that. All right, so the Diamondbacks could wrap up and punch their ticket to the postseason today. As soon as today, it would take a win and a Braves win over the Cubs, but there are several other scenarios where the Diamondbacks could be heading to the playoffs. We'll keep you up to speed on everything going on with the Arizona Diamondbacks. For Alex Weiner, I'm Steve Zinsmeister. You've been listening to the Ain't No Fang podcast for Arizona Sports.